All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here. Today, we're going to break down the best decks for ranked battles to finish off this B3 season, the Pulsing Aura season. We got, I think as I'm recording this, about 4 or 5 days left of the ranked season. The metagame is where it is at this point. There's some interesting things to cover. I did just recently record a podcast with the guys that'll be over on Oricorio TCG's channel soon, so you guys should go check that out for sure. At the same time, we talked about the new cards that are releasing. So, you know, it's always a weird time. Whenever we get the new cards on the horizon, people are kind of finishing off the ranked season. The current season is in its kind of final form. It is what it will be. Hopefully we get some interesting results. In this weekend's tournament, PMPT number 32 is tomorrow. And because it's the last tournament of the season, some people will just sort of bring whatever they think is going to win that has already been figured out. But sometimes people bring some crazy decks. So if you're interested, link to register down in the description below. Definitely register for the tournament. And then stay tuned for, of course, all of the information that's going to be coming out about the next set, which I already forgot the name, but the next mini set coming, because that's going to be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of stuff yet to be announced, so I think we're going to have to wait and see. Anyway, let's get into the decks today. Again, we've talked about all of these decks already so far this season. There's going to be a couple of small updates. You guys can bounce around, use the timestamps down below. This is going to be a quicker video just because, we've, for the most part, talked about these decks, but yeah, anyway, let's get right into it. The first deck is going to be Meowscarada. I wanted to put this at the beginning of the video because I do think that Meowscarada is a very, very solid deck in the metagame. I think it benefits from the same things that Sceptile benefits from, and to be honest, in some matchups, it's actually going to be kind of a better option than Sceptile. It is a 2-prize Pokemon instead of a 3-prize Pokemon, which is always somewhat beneficial if you can go Meowscarada into Meowscarada. Because it's a Grass-type deck, you get access to Ogerpon. And Ogerpon's a pretty big deal. It is certainly becoming one of the more valuable cards across the entire metagame, given that, sleep is so common. And that is sort of the biggest story as we wrap up the season, is that Bad Dreams, Igglybuff, Darkrai is exactly what we sort of thought it was always. It hasn't really changed at this point in the metagame. It's definitely, causing a little bit of dismay throughout the community. It is certainly one of the more oppressive strategies we have ever had in Pokemon Pocket. There is some counterplay to it. Of course, Ogerpon is a good example of that. You can play PCLs, you can play Big Malisadas, you can play Comfey, I guess, in some of those decks. So, there's some stuff that you can counterplay to it. I think the big issue for Sleep Scam in general is just the first turn, like going first. The fact that they can sort of do what they want to do before you even have a chance to play your cards down to counterplay it. Other things in the metagame like Goomy, seeing a little bit of play to counter Igglybuff. There's some stuff out there, so it's an interesting development. But, at the end of the day, I think that Meowscarada with Ogerpon being a Grass-type deck, not having to worry about some of those Dark-type matchups, and also getting access to Fragrant Forest, which is such an incredible buff for Grass-type decks this season. It's really a significant option, right? Not only do we get Leaf Cape, so we're at 190 HP with the Meowscarada EX, but we also can throw in Lucky Ice Pops, and it's just a quality deck. And, I wanted to highlight it because so far this season, this has been probably one of the more pleasant surprises. It does feel like the little brother of Sceptile, which consistently has actually been the most played deck at a lot of different tournaments over the last week or so. But Meowscarada is always there. It's always seeing play, and it's always pretty successful. You're going to find this particular archetype at the top of the standings in most tournaments that you look at. So certainly still a valuable option. I don't think it's really a surprise at this point, but I did just want to highlight it because I do think it's a quality deck, a very respectable deck currently in the metagame. Kind of counter meta, which I think Grass sort of exists in right now, which is an important thing to note. That being said, let's talk about, aforementioned sleep decks, because last Friday, when I gave my recommendations for when the ranked season was starting up, I told people, sleep still exists. It's still going to be good. A lot of people are going to be playing it, but I, in fact, did not highlight or showcase any of the Sleep Scam decks in that video. I was sort of doing my best. I did reference it. And just like I'm doing in today's video, I did talk about it. It is something that is going on in the metagame, but I didn't highlight the deck lists because at that point, I just didn't really want to tell people, hey, just play Sleep, just keep playing. Everyone play Sleep and, get your 52% win rates and just keep climbing. I tried my best not to kind of push that agenda. But at this point, the secret's out, if you want to call it a secret. As everyone knows, Sleep is good, as it's always been. I do think Sleep Lucario is, in general, the strongest deck in the game. Lucario being able to deal a ton of damage, and then, of course, Igglybuff Darkrai allowing you to sometimes win the game without your opponent being able to do anything. It's just a strong deck. I'm not a big fan of Sleep in general, not only playing against it, but playing Sleep, just because of the coin flip nature of it and whatnot. It is inherently kind of a high roll deck. which is always an interesting thing to note. But I do think that if you're playing Sleep, Altaria and Lucario are very similar. It really is like the core of the deck is the Igglybuff Darkrai. So whether you want to play a little bit more of a more consistent version with Altaria, not necessarily needing to play things like Karina, Antiquity, and get 3 energies onto your Mega Pokemon to take KOs, or you want to play Lucario and you want to do those things exactly and have the option to hit for 190 plus and then be able to win the game that way. There's just alternating win conditions. Whether you would rather play Altaria, which is the more, sort of tempo-based, a turn 2, turn 3 type of option, more consistent, or you want to play Lucario and just deal big damage. They're both effectively the same deck. They do the same thing. It's just Lucario does some things better than Altaria. Altaria does some things better than Lucario. This is the deck that people are playing. We got the double X speed in there. You want to get the consistent leadoffs. Once again, very reliant on getting Igglybuff in the active early, getting your Darkrai's down, setting up a Lucario. That is the deck. That is literally all this deck will do. So I don't need to talk about how to play it or anything, but it's good. And similarly, here is Altaria. And as you see, we're not playing Karina, we're not playing Antiquity. So here we have Alicia to kind of more consistently get our basics down. As you can see, the deck's a bit more consistent on that side. And then we're playing Protected Poncho. It's just a pretty decent tech card. Certain cards are fundamentally like tech inclusions. I call them like the 20th card in people's decks. Poncho is a really good 20th card, right? Because it really does help you in significant matchups, whether that's, Chien-Pao, or whether it's Hitmontop or Pheromosa, which people aren't playing right now, we'll talk about. But anyway, anything that's going to deal bench damage, it's nice to have a Poncho and sort of check that off your list of things that you can potentially counterplay your opponent with. The other is Field Blower, and you'll see Field Blower in certain decks in this video because it is a really effective 20th card. That's just the reality of it. Most decks are about 18 cards deep. That's sort of the thing. I would say that like Sabrina and Cyrus are almost needed inclusions into decks currently in the metagame. And you're gonna play Copycat, you're gonna play Research, you're gonna play your Pokemon. And if you're playing Bad Dreams, you're gonna play X Speed just for the consistent leadoff, Pokeballs, and that really leaves like 1 or 2 cards in these decks. Alicia is an example here, as we've seen Lucario. The package is the same 18 cards. It's literally the same 18 cards with 2, other than, of course, Lucario. If you swap Lucario and Riolu for Swablu and Altaria, the only 2 differences for cards here are Arena of Antiquity and Karina, which, of course, for Lucario deal extra damage, or in the sense of Altaria, you're playing Poncho and Alicia. So that's the concept there. You could plug and play Poncho, I would say. You could play a Field Blower. You could play whatever, to be honest. Like, it doesn't really matter. I do think Poncho's a good choice, but you would play Licia here because that certainly is a really good option. And then for Lucario, again, the big benefit of Lucario is that you get access to the damage buffs. Anyway, that's my tangent. Sleep decks are good. You're going to see them a bunch. Do you want to play them? If so, there they are. Enjoy it. Next up is going to be Magnezone Oricorio. Here's an example that I pulled up recently because it's playing Chingling, and I wanted to highlight the Chingling. The last card here at the bottom is going to be Giant Cape. It's cut off here. But yeah, I think Magnezone Oricorio is good. Quite honestly, I think that it's a decent option to a lot of the decks you're going to see currently in the metagame. Oricorio feels, again, less prominent. The grass decks are pretty good into Oricorio. They like Meowscarada plays non-EX, Meowscarada, Sceptile plays non-EX, Sceptile. They're grass, they got extra HP. It's just sort of one of those things where Oricorio has always struggled into like the grass archetypes, right? But Magnezone Oricorio now with Magnezone EX has been consistently throughout the season a good option. I'm always a bit hesitant to recommend Oricorio-based decks in ranked, unless there is sort of like a clear and concise counterplay where you can feel confident into that matchup. Oricorio feels like an interesting deck because now more than ever, it can function as a deck that doesn't rely on Oricorio, which is interesting. You know what I mean? Like, it's a cool thing. That being said, Hydriegon's still seeing play. The Ogerpon in here will help you with Bad Dreams, but fighting is also somewhat common. If you're playing Fighting Lucario, you're going to have to deal with that. And as we know, Oricorio isn't necessarily like the best Pokemon into Bad Dreams Darkrai. Like, it's not going to stop that really from happening. But we do have Giant Cape, we have Ogerpon, we got Ice Pops in here. No PCL, so maybe you could have slotted a PCL in here somewhere, but this deck list playing 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, 1 Copycat, 1 Licia, 1 Clement. And that is sort of the core thing with Magneton, is that, you get access to Licia and Clement in Copycat. So you kind of feel like you have certain advantages with those consistency cards. The 1 Chingling in the deck is interesting, but we're seeing a lot of Chingling for the reasons I think that Chingling is just such a good card. Everybody points at Chingling and says, you know what, I'm going to stop my opponent from rare candying, and that's worthwhile. But people forget about all of the other item cards that people just play in their decks, whether it is Field Blower, whether it is Lucky Ice Pop, whether it's a Pokeball. Stopping your opponent from playing Pokeball is a big deal. Chingling is the GOAT. It's just a good card. I wanted to highlight this list because, quite frankly, I do think it is somewhat worth it to just play one Chingling in this deck list. It's just a good Pokemon to play. Several decks are playing Chingling right now, and you know, I really do kind of recommend it. But yeah, nothing else really to say about Magnezone or Oricorio other than here's a list playing Chingling that I liked, so I wanted to highlight it. So there we go. Next up is Suicune, which fundamentally did struggle early this season. We did talk about it. And I think sometimes people get a little confused about things that I say at the beginning of the season, contradicting, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks into the season, but things change, right? And that's the whole point of us sort of doing these videos on a weekly basis, is that the metagame develops. Suicune was really, really poorly performing early on in the season for whatever the reason. And then eventually it wasn't. And that's the reality of why, you know, Suicune wasn't recommended and then was. And that's, I mean, again, that's where we're at. I think Suicune's still a good deck. You're probably going to see a ton of them on ranked. You are going to be seeing Field Blower. That is sort of the common, I would say, like 20th card in this deck list. PCL still replacing Irida, of course. And yeah, I mean, it's a good deck. You do have to be careful of Ponchos, right? Because Poncho is certainly annoying, and that's why we play the Field Blower, you know, quite frankly. Suicune's matchups are interesting. Chien-Pao and Suicune always actually does well into Hydreigon, but into most other things, the matchups seem to be like a little lackluster. I don't mean lackluster in the sense that like you lose to stuff. It doesn't have like a significant win rate into a lot of like top tier meta decks. Other than maybe fire decks if you play them, and Hydreigon again, it has a winning matchup, which is always an upside. But yeah, I mean, it's a good deck. It's a good deck, and you know, I don't think the lists have really changed much over the last couple of weeks, but I still recommend it. So there you go. There's Suicune. Are you surprised? Are you surprised to see Suicune in this video? That being said, are you surprised to see Hydreigon in this video? I don't really think Hydreigon is like a great deck right now. I just think that there's a lot of grass, you know, and I think that we're still in a metagame that not only came with a new grass type deck, more grass type buffs. Grass is, of course, strong into Hydreigon and the other dark type decks, but you do have the benefit of just being a really strong deck list. So consistently in tournaments, you're going to see Hydreigon at the top of the standings. It's not the most consistent deck in terms of its play rate this season or its matchup spreads and its win rate, but this is ranked we're talking about. We're talking about ranked battles. We're talking about you play a high roll deck and you just get into it game after game. And, you know, Hydreigon has that ability to not really care much about what's going on. If you do find yourself hitting exclusively grass type decks all the time, like Meowscarada and Sceptile, then maybe you move off of Hydreigon. But, you know, into Bad Dream stuff, into you know, other mega decks, Hydreigon significantly, you know, feels like a strong choice, you know? And again, another deck that really hasn't changed much. This list is a bit different because we've swapped, I think, like a Sabrina, and now we are playing the Leap over Absol, right? So not only are we playing Bombardier, but we're just playing the Leap over Absol, which, you know, we used to play in old Hydreigon decks anyway. I think early this season, people just weren't playing Absol. Maybe they were playing like double Bombardier. It's been a little bit of changes back and forth. Some decks playing one Sabrina, one Cyrus. Fundamentally here, not playing Hiking Trail, which definitely was common at some point. So some developments for Hydreigon. I do think Leap over Absol is a solid win condition card. It has a retreat cost of 1. It's a decent leadoff. I just like the card. And I think that it does make sense, especially with the addition of Bombardier, double Rocky Helmet. We got Ice Pops in here. And there you go. You know, I don't have a lot to say about Hydreigon. That's why this video is short today. If you guys were curious, there's not much else to really say about what's going on. You know, we know what the metagame is. We've been covering it the last few weeks, but I still feel obligated to kind of make this video for you guys. So I don't know, you know, again, some changes, right? So maybe you guys can update your lists and, you know, kind of get a feel for it. Maybe you're like, you know what? I think Hydreigon does kind of feel pretty good right now. And it's kind of a meme on the channel for sure about how much I've disrespected and talked down about Hydreigon. It's not so much an issue anymore, right? I mean, the metagame has developed around it, and it is, there's plenty of decks that do well into Hydreigon, so even though the strategy itself is one that I don't necessarily condone that heavily, it's not something I find to be that fun. It's not an incredibly toxic deck, at least comparatively to some of the other decks in the metagame, like Bad Dreams, for example. Certainly, I would say, you know, a bit more of a toxic strategy. It's kind of crazy just when you think it couldn't get worse. And then they gave us the old Darkrai Iggly buff, and it was like, wait a minute, let's go back. No, I'm kidding. I actually think, I had this discussion on the podcast, like I actually think that Hydreigon was a bigger problem in terms of its meta dominance at its peak, right? When we were in that kind of time period of the metagame, than Bad Dreams is currently. Like I think it's very good, it's very dominant, it's very popular, but at least it's not as dominant as Hydriegon was at its peak, and also, you know, technically there are multiple ways to play Bad Dreams, whereas Hydriegon, it was just the same thing. Yeah, I mean, that's my opinion. You guys can feel free to disagree. I think that the gameplay in the enjoyment of playing the game into Bad Dreams is made way worse, because you just have to sit there and hope that you can break out of coin flips, and it's not very engaging, it's not very fun. But again, in terms of like meta dominance, I think that we have enough counterplay to sleep, and we're probably going to get more at some point, so it is what it is. They're both problematic decks for their respective time periods, but you know, it is what it is. All right, let's talk about my GOAT so far this season, which is Sceptile. A lot of developments here over the last 3 weeks of Sceptile. There was some sort of Goomy strategies in here, which is good, but right now, you know, speaking to some of the other players, seeing the results in the tournaments, I do feel like Chingling is still the best option right now. And this is what people are playing. They're playing Growth Extract. We got a Leaf Cape in here, Double Fragrant Forest, Lily for the healing. We're playing a non-EX Sceptile for the Oricorio matchup, and we're playing Celebi and Grovyle for the Slicing Snipe win condition, and as well as a Cyrus. So the concept here, and I think the development around Sceptile was like, you know what, there's just enough decks playing Rare Candy, and Sceptile itself can benefit us to some degree to not play Rare Candy, and we get sort of less hard countered by other Chingling decks. So why don't we just play Chingling, have the upper hand in those matchups into other Rare Candy decks like Hydriegon, you know, like Suicune, like other Sceptile decks or whatever that might be playing Rare Candy, and we're just sort of a more we're more of a tempo, you know, mid-game focused deck, which again I do like. You know, the pacing for this deck feels good. Being Grass type is just exceptionally strong currently in the metagame. Chingling Lock, always going to be really good. I like Sceptile, and I think it's a really, really solid deck currently. And it's interesting. You know, it's so funny. I'm not saying I feel gratified in saying it, but a lot of these decks really do kind of come down late in the season to like, yeah, I'll just play Chingling, which is because Chingling's the GOAT. It is just the best Pokemon. It's so good. It's got the strongest effect. And I know Igglybuff, you know, turn 150 damage, whatever. I get it. But Chingling is still the man. It's still a great card. And it just buys you time, you know? It just buys you time to get into your Sceptile and then hopefully win the game that way, you know? And just being able to hit the active for 130 and then have the option to Slicing Snipe if they retreat to the bench, if you don't have Cyrus, like it is a really solid strategy. Grovyle and Celebi were really nice inclusions to the archetype. We've seen that actually. I think it was Crimson Blaze when they started to release like somewhat relevant middle evolutions to archetypes. Celebi is such a good inclusion. Not only is it a grass type Pokemon, you can find it with Fragrant Forest, but now, you know, we can utilize the attacks of that middle evolution even if we are a fully evolved Pokemon. It's a really well-crafted strategy. I think that, you know, the developers of Pokemon Pocket did a pretty good job here with this deck. I think they kind of hit the nail on the head, and at least it is grass type as well, which I do appreciate. Maybe they've been watching the channel the last couple of months, because again, Hydreigon was an issue. I do expect, like I said, I do expect there to be something that releases that is at least a more significant answer to Bad Dreams. Maybe not. Maybe it comes the set after this set. I don't know. But typically when they release strong strategies, they release things following at least a set or two after the fact that hopefully cancels it out to a degree. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. We'll have to wait and see for next week. But shout out to Sceptile, a really, really fun deck, one of my favorites. And this is the way that people are playing it right now in tournaments. All right, lastly is the weekly wild card. And honestly, there's not, again, it's late in the season. There's not a lot of like crazy decks that I would recommend. But you know what? We're going to go back to the well here. And the weekly wild card this week is, in fact, Giratina Darkrai, which is a deck that I have respect for currently. I do. I think that what's cool about this deck list is that Indeedee can help counteract some of the Bad Dreams chip damage. It's a deck list that utilizes abilities and sort of slow buildup. So even though like Bad Dreams is annoying and sometimes you get locked into sleep, you can still use Giratina's ability while you're asleep. You can still use Darkrai's ability while you're asleep. And I think that's pretty funny. I think it's interesting that we've kind of come full circle, and the inherent brokenness of this deck list and how it functions is really outside of the scope of the metagame. There's truly nothing else in the game like this deck list and these Pokemon. Darkrai EX and Giratina are still strong. You know, we got all of the other fun stuff in here, like Starting Plains, Heavy Helmet, Lucky Ice Pop, Field Blower, all the stuff that you would, know and love. You know, Giratina's been a fine deck this season. I just sort of wanted to include it. to talk about it today. I had a couple of decent tournament placements this week, typically from top players. I think always people downplay the complexity actually of playing Giratina Darkrai, one of the higher skill gap decks in Pokemon Pocket's history, and I do kind of think that's somewhat where it kind of lies currently right now. Yeah, shout out to Giratina Darkrai, man. It's a good deck. You should play it. It's a pretty nonchalant weekly wild card this week, but it is going to be our weekly wild card. So what do you guys think? Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. I really appreciate you guys watching and staying engaged here, and hopefully you participate in the tournament this weekend. Go and check out Erico's podcast where I was on there with the other guys, and we talked about the new cards and whatnot and the current state of the metagame. Definitely check that out. And also, of course, stay tuned for next week once we get sort of the full set release and the set coming out next week, and anything that might be an update for me to cover on the channel, which we'll definitely do. Definitely. So yeah, there it is, guys. That's the video. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.